All right, you guys. We're going to be talking today about one of the most important and forgotten abdominal core stability muscles that your body have, and you don't think about them until it's too late. And I'm referring to the transverse abdominal muscle. And now this muscle is super deep, very deep. And I want to also share, as far with the transverse abdomen, I also want to share the pelvic floor. Now we're talking about core stability, and I told you guys that there, depending on which book, there's 5 to 7 muscles. So let's talk about these two together, but I'm going to be referring to the transverse abdominis because it's easier for you guys to remember. Now, like I mentioned, your transverse abdominis, it lies very, very deep, and it goes kind of like in a diagonal slanted form, kind of like direction, and that's why you are sharing the space, or the transverse abdominis is sharing the space with the internal external obliques. It goes through your pubic bones all the way through. Okay, so it's very deep. Now, the one way to know if your transverse abdominis is kind of, we talked a little bit about it last week with the core strength, is to test your bird dog core stability. Different than the dead bug. The dead bug exercise actually is to strengthen the transverse abdominis. The bird dog helps you test how stable your core muscles are that are involving core stability. So kind of think face down, face up. That's one way to think about it. Now, the other one that you hear me kind of always kind of like roll my eyes is plank, because plank, the plank muscle, or the plank exercise, sorry, is sustainable, right? And with that said, you actually engage deep, deep muscles in your abdomen region versus flexing your torso or flexing your body, which is the main job of an abdominal muscles. Okay, now just keep in mind, because a deep abdominal muscle, we tend to, and we always or tend to remember it because of the hernias, right? So if you have ever have an inguinal hernia, it's because the inguinal ligament goes through it, the inguinal nerve goes or goes through it, right? So can you live with a hernia? Possibly, yes. Does it hurt? Yes. How do you know? Well, an easiest way to know if your transverse abdominis is weak is if you look at some guys that have like total like a 2 or 4 pack on the top of the abdominals, but then they have a pooch on the bottom. That's kind of like a weak transverse abdominis, weak pelvic floor. If you're older, you tend to have problems controlling, at times, if not all the time, your urinary, right? You're kind of like leak a little bit because your pelvic floor and your transverse abdominals are connected, right? So you kind of have problem doing that. Now, on that same token, for every cause there's an effect, right? So while we're talking about the transverse abdominis, the opposing muscles are your back extensor muscles. So your rectus spine that runs along the side of your spine, literally one parallel to on each side. So if you're trying to kind of like, how do I, give a break to my transversal abdominals, then just do back extensions or some sort of modified exercise like that. Now, the best way that I have people start working on the transverse abdominis is by breathing. Now, there's many ways to work on your breathing, and when I talk breathing, I'm referring to diaphragmatic breathing, because that's where it attaches down low. And by the way, the diaphragm muscle is one of the core stability muscles. So with that said, work on the diaphragmatic breathing, either the box breathing or the 3-1 breathing or the 4-step breathing, whichever one works for you that is easier. That way you don't do the Valsalva, right? The one that you hold your breath. That's when you hear or see martial artists, when they punch, they kind of like do that big exhale, like huh and huh, because they want to like really get that breathing pattern coming from the diaphragm instead of from the upper respiratory. So important muscle to not forget it. Now, a simple exercise to start with, besides plank, is do like a 90-90, where you bring your knees above your hips and your feet off the ground. And then while you breathe, you drop one foot to the floor at a time without letting your back arch. And often, if not all the time, every time I work with somebody that either has quite a bit of back pain or they consider themselves to have weak pelvic floor, I use a spirometer, not a spirometer, sorry, a blood pressure cuff on their small of the back. That way they can see the dial on the blood pressure cuff, and we try to keep it within 10 milligrams of mercury. So when they drop one foot and lift the other one, we don't let it fluctuate more than 10 milligrams. And that's a nice biofeedback for the person to do at home. So another one that I shared with you guys also last week, as we were kind of wrapping up the core strength part, was the hollow hold, right? And that's more of a Pilates exercise, but it really engages your deep muscles while you breathe. And again, there's not much flexion. There's some flexion, but there's not much flexion, but there's definitely deep muscle contraction. So that's what I got as far as the transverse abdominals I want to share with you guys that are practical. Tomorrow I'm going to be sharing some of these exercises with you so you guys can see it in action, and hopefully get inspired and get creative on how to integrate those into your daily workout routine. Now, should you do a core stability exercise every day? You can probably do a little bit of it every day. Like I mentioned last week, you got both types of fiber, right? Slow and fast twitch fiber. So you can get away with it. So why not, right? The key is to have enough arsenal in your toolkit so you can rotate it and don't overtrain the muscle. So we'll go over that tomorrow. Until then, be well. I got to get back to the soccer game. Bye.